Welcome to the Champions of Active Women podcast. In this podcast, we will interview women who have been successful within athletics and beyond. We hope that the amazing women in these interviews encourage and inspire girls and women to be active for a lifetime, to reach their goals, and to break new barriers in sport and life. This podcast is brought to you by the Active Women's Health Initiative in the Sports Medicine Research Institute at the University of Kentucky. The mission of the Active Women's Health Initiative is to optimize health and promote physical activity and wellness for girls and women across the lifespan. We hope you enjoy our conversations and join us in understanding women's health today to ensure women's health tomorrow.
Hello, and welcome to the Champions of Active Women's podcast. I am Hannah Hoke, and today we are flipping the mic on your regular host, Dee Dlugonski. Dee earned her undergraduate degree in kinesiology from Penn State University, where she was a 9-time All-American swimmer and a member of 2 Big Ten championship teams in 2002 and 2005. After graduating, she coached swimming at the University of Connecticut and Penn State University before returning to school to earn her PhD in kinesiology from the University of Illinois. Dee's research focuses on physical activity promotion among women, children, and families. She brings her expertise as an athlete, a coach, and a researcher to her current role as the coordinator of the Active Women's Health Initiative at the University of Kentucky. Dee, thank you for finally agreeing to let me interview you, and welcome.
Thanks, Hannah. I'm happy to be on this side of the mic.
All right. Could you begin by telling me about your early life sport and physical activity experiences?
Yeah, sure. So as I was preparing for this interview, I was thinking back to childhood, which we don't do a whole lot, I realize. And, immediately I thought about not structured sport, but really just playing outside. I have so many good memories of me and my brother and my cousins spending just lots of unstructured playtime outside. We used to run around. We had one little play set, and I just remember sitting on top of it with my cousin, and we usually tormented my brother and my younger cousin, but which wasn't very nice of us in hindsight. But we were running and playing. We had some land, and so most of my memories there were about those unstructured experiences. I did play basketball for a season. I played soccer for a season, and those were okay, but they weren't going to be my long-term things. And so my mom, one summer realized that I was pretty good at swimming. I was racing my cousin again, same cousin that I played with when I was younger, racing her in the pool. She was older than me. And my mom's like, wow, she's pretty good. And so she took me to the Y to kind of try out, if you will. And it wasn't really a tryout, but just to see if I was ready for a formal swim team. And to be honest, I really didn't want to go. It was a struggle for me to do that because I had had some sort of experience which I perceived to be negative in swim lessons. And I really was like, I don't want to go do that, but she made me do it. And I'm thankful she did because I started swimming when I was 9 and swam all the way through college.
So you mentioned your mom and your cousins about people that played an important role in your early sport experiences, but is there anyone else that really contributed to the growth and the development of you as a swimmer and contributed to your career?
Yeah, absolutely. One particular person, lots of people who supported me throughout my career. My mom in particular, she's just a rock star and always, she was never someone who pushed me really hard in swimming. That was what I did on my own, but she was always there to support me. And I remember my younger years when we'd go to these big long meets, and so many of my peers had parents who were asking them about their times and how well they did. And my mom gave me a hug and asked me what I wanted at the concession stand. She was always supportive. And I think she's one of the reasons why I loved swimming for a really long time and still love the sport. So my mom was definitely an important part, but second to her for sure was my coach at the Y, Steve Leonardi. He is an amazing man, and he was a unique coach because he cared a whole bunch about us as a person, and not just athletes. So he was so important in my development, and especially in kind of preparing me for college as well.
So you mentioned college, which is great, because the next question is really wanting to know more about how sport impacted your education, either positively or negatively. So you journeying through quite a bit of education, being involved in sports, and doing quite well in sports, actually. So can you talk a little bit about that relationship?
Yeah, I think as I was reflecting on this question, I think that I probably would have been a good student regardless, with or without swimming. I mean, that's something that's part of who I am as a person, and I'm not sure that would have changed a whole lot with or without swimming. But I think what swimming did for me was really open doors and let me see possibilities that I may not have seen otherwise. So, for example, that same coach, Steve Leonardi, I remember when I was getting closer to probably as a junior in high school, and he really was pushing me to think about college and where are you going to go to college and are you going to swim and what do you want to study? And he did all kinds of research. I was thinking about that he made these like packets of information. I guess he contacted the schools and got information, put it all together in a packet about these schools that were a possibility for me. He, marketed me as an athlete to make sure I had an opportunity to go to college and swim if I wanted to. And so he really, I think, did some pushing that I needed and not sure if I would have known how to do on my own. And so he opened some doors, and being good at swimming opened some doors educationally for me. I landed at Penn State and got my degree in kinesiology. I would say the only negative I can think about is that I spent a lot of time being an athlete. And so it didn't leave a whole lot of time for maybe exploring some other extracurriculars that could have taken me down another career path. But at the end of the day, I found out that I loved being active. And I mean, that's what I do for a career now is I try to understand how and why people are active and promote it.
So as an athletic trainer, I know a lot about athletes and what it takes to be an athlete, especially at an institution like Penn State, and you're a 9-time All-American. So there's a lot of work that went into getting you to that level repetitively. Can you provide some insight into what that looks like? So being a collegiate athlete and being an athlete at that level and all the things, not just the practice, but a lot of the other pieces that go into keeping you competing at that level.
Yeah, so I mean, just the practice is we would practice 5 days a week from 6 to 8 in the morning, and then 4 or 5 days a week in the afternoon from 2 to 4, 2 to 5, and then Saturday mornings for probably a little 3 hours on Saturday mornings. And then on top of that, we were lifting weights, and those were separate from those standard times. And then, being a student athlete, they're also paying a whole lot of attention to who you are as a student and how well you're doing as a student. So usually, for me, that wasn't a big challenge. For some people, that's a huge challenge to manage the amount of time it takes to be an athlete and, to do the physical training on top of school. That's a lot of time. And so for some people, that's a huge challenge. I felt like I was prepared for that challenge. I came out of a good high school and I'm kind of an academic at my core. So I guess even then, though I probably wouldn't have called myself that then, I know that about myself now and didn't struggle as much maybe as some other people. But I think what athletics also does is provides tons of resources. So if you are struggling, there are opportunities for tutors and for help if you ask for it. So there was a huge time commitment physically, being a student. Still, I think one thing that reminded me when I was in school, how challenging that was physically is that when I had a break, I guess it was my senior year after I was done with swimming, I went to class, in one of my morning classes, probably like 9 o'clock, and I was taking notes and I was not falling asleep while I was writing. And I still remember that feeling. I was like, oh, this is what it's like to not be completely drained physically and mentally and emotionally every day. I mean, it's just an intense, because you're not just physically training, but you're training to be at your peak with other people. So there's so much emotional energy that goes into that too. Awesome.
So you finished your successful swimming career at Penn State, and then you went on to coach swimming. And that's another awesome career that not a lot of people get to experience. And you coached again at a collegiate level, which is a different level for many of us to comprehend. So can you talk to us about how your experience is swimming and that career of coaching, and working with student athletes and becoming a coach to them that you've experienced that influenced you growing up, and talk with us a little bit about that relationship and that experience impacting other men and women in that sport.
Yeah, when I was finishing up school, I really didn't know what I wanted to be. I had a degree in kinesiology, and I knew my swimming career was coming to an end. And I kept saying, I thought grad school might be my future, but I didn't know what I wanted to be or do. And so I said, it's silly to go to grad school before I know what I want to do with my life. And so I always said, I'm not going back to grad school. Until I know. Well, then I had an opportunity to be a graduate assistant swim coach at the University of Connecticut. And that involves going back to graduate school, but it also involves staying connecting to swimming. So I had a great opportunity there to be in school. And I started school for sport administration. I was at UConn for a year, and school was fine. It wasn't bad. It just was fine. It was not lighting my world on fire, but I loved the relationships I was developing with the student athletes and kind of being on the other side of the coin, helping those student athletes through their journey to be the best they could in the pool. And so I really loved that. And then my head coach from Penn State called and said, hey, do you want to come back and be an assistant coach? And what an amazing opportunity that was. But it was a hard decision because I was 1 year through through a 2-year master's degree program. And I had never quit anything in my entire life. Like, this was just not, it wasn't part of me. So that was a really hard decision. And I sat on it for probably a couple of weeks, as long as I could. And eventually I decided that school was just fine, and this wasn't the right opportunity for school for me, but I was really enjoying the coaching. So I went back to coach at Penn State for a couple of years, and again, really impactful. I love the relationships with the athletes, but it still wasn't fulfilling me completely.
And so at the end of your time at Penn State, you took a journey now to the University of Illinois, and you moved out of competitive athletics and went back to school. So can you talk a little bit about that transition from competitive athletics to school, and how you made that decision, and how you found your love for physical activity and athletics within your studies and what became your area of research?
Yeah, and this is a great example of where my kind of personal and professional worlds have blended together. So I was at Penn State, and I as an assistant coach, I spent a lot of time interacting with the athletes. My relationships were the favorite part of that coaching job, for sure. But as I was interacting with the athletes, I saw female athletes in particular who were incredibly talented. They worked so hard, both in the pool, out of the pool. I mean, these were all Americans, national champions, and they were elite athletes. And yet I saw these female athletes in my office who had what I perceived to be very low confidence. And this was really confusing to me. So the academic in me was like, why is this happening? And that's the question that took me back to graduate school. I ended up at the University of Illinois because it's a great program, but also because my then boyfriend, who would become my fiance and my husband, was at the University of Illinois, and he was a swim coach there as well. And so we met while we were coaching. I was looking for a place to go back to school. Illinois was a great place to do that. And so my personal and professional worlds kind of blended really well together. I actually went back to school thinking I'd get my master's degree and do I don't know what, but I was having a great experience there. And really there, I think it shows the value of graduate school, was able to broaden my perspectives on not just sport, but activity in general, and start to see the value in being active as a lifestyle choice, in addition to sport as a beneficial activity.
So your research currently focuses on physical activity promotion among families. And you've done a lot of research with mothers and children, female related. Can you talk about why this topic is important to you, and in addition, can you give us some insight and sneak peek into your research and what our audience and listeners might find beneficial?
Yeah, I think part of my research, I always wonder if it's kind of like a living thing that grows with me, and so I started in graduate school. My work was on single motherhood and physical activity, and I was very interested and still am in single motherhood because my dad died when I was young, and my mom raised myself and my brother as a single parent. And now as a parent myself, I have no idea how she did that. Just have so much respect for her. And so I think that, in graduate school before I had kids, that was one of the things I was interested in. And that's evolved now to think about, okay, well, it's not just mom, right? Sometimes that's dad, and sometimes that's mom and dad, or dad and dad. And I think that our families provide a really unique opportunity for us to promote physical activity, not just among one person, but among multiple people. And in my own family, being active is one of the ways we spend quality time together. And so my hope is to better understand how families interact around physical activity, and then to use some of that knowledge to promote physical activity for families.
And do you have, so you've done some research through your dissertation and through other studies. Do you have any findings that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, I think one of the things that has been kind of really eye-opening for me, and it's a finding that is really starting to develop out of not just my own research, but others in the field, is this idea of role modeling, and particularly when we think of role modeling for young children. And one of the things that I found it's not necessarily surprising when you really think about it, but it's not the way we've traditionally studied parent and child physical activity. Is that role modeling is most effective when your kids can see you being active. So, if you are a really active person, but none of that happens in the eyesight of your child, it's probably not going to be as effective as if your child sees you being active. And that makes a lot of common sense, but typically what we've done in the literature is just kind of look at how active is parent, how active is child, and we think that more active parents should have more active children, and that's not always the case. But when we look some of the early data looking at patterns of co-participation in activity, seems like parents who engage in their children in physical activity together, those are the parents who have active children. And so for me, that's really motivating for me to get out and be active with my kids. And sadly, most of the time that means it's not activity. It is activity for me, but it's not something I would consider exercise or kind of health beneficial activity. Although now I will say, my youngest is 4 and he just started riding a pedal bike and he is fast. And so now he's on his bike, my 7-year-old is on his bike, we go on family walks, and so we've been joking that they're not really walks anymore, they're more like runs. Yeah. And so now I'm starting to get a little more actual activity when we're active together.
So right now we're in the middle of our social isolation and social distancing, and so it would be interesting to see the impact of the time period we're in at the moment and our co-activity and as a family unit, just because schedules are different now, and family dynamics are very different across the board at the moment. And I know in my neighborhood, there's many more people that are out walking and riding and pushing than I've ever seen before at all hours of the day versus what little time there is at night when we get home and finish up the day and dinner and things like that. Yeah. So you've talked a lot about your current physical activity and being engaged with your children. And can you give us a little insight outside of being active with your kids? What is your current physical activity, and why is remaining physically active important for you?
Yeah, being active, and not just with my kids, but being active on my own in a way where I have some space to be me and be separate from my kids is really important to me. And I know it has long-term health benefits, but that's really not why I do it on a daily basis. On a daily basis, I do it because it makes me feel good about me. I don't have clinical anxiety that I know of, but it's certainly, I know, and I've noticed this as I've gotten older, it seems to be more common that if I haven't been active for a couple of days, I start to feel a little more anxious about everything in my life. And so now I guess I could say I use it to manage those feelings of anxiety. I like being active. I like moving my body. I like challenging my body. And I do not have a really set schedule right now, and I'm not going to blame that on this isolation period. I guess it's more structured than some people's schedules, but I don't feel like it's a hardcore schedule. So I love spin class, so I try to do that a couple times a week when we're able. I don't have a bike at home, so I'm not doing that right now. I love yoga, and I try to do that once a week. So I'm by no means a yogi, but I like to do it. I love walking, and that's something that I probably wouldn't have said 10 or 15 years ago, but I love to walk by myself, but with my dog, with my kids. So pretty much any excuse to get outside and walk, I love. And then I like strength training too. So some mix of those things throughout the week. It's not super rigid. In fact, I'm probably ready for my next physical challenge now that my kids are getting a little older, but not yet.
So you didn't mention swimming.
No, I didn't.
And there's probably many reasons for that. But do you like to engage in water activity with your family?
With my family, I do. So, in the summertime, we're at the pool a lot more, but even during the winter, we like to go to the Y and swim when we can. I've gone through periods like right after I stopped swimming, I would swim pretty frequently. When I was at Connecticut, there was a woman who had finished her career recently, and so we swam together. And then I went through a period where I would think I forgot how to swim, and so I would just get in the pool to convince myself I could still swim. And then I would realize I wasn't very good anymore, and so I'd stop. And I'm in a point in my life where I've started to think about master swimming, but I haven't taken that plunge yet. So it may still be in my future, but not a whole lot right now.
Yeah, that's awesome. I've found in my journey that there are some swimmers that take a break for a while, and it's really what I've captured recently is that when there's not a lot of people cheering you on, or you're not in these big races and things like that, it's just different. It's not, it's just a different experience, and you've got to be ready to engage in that new experience. So last question, what advice would you like to give girls and women about playing sports and being active?
Yeah, I think this is such a big question. But I think what it comes down to is finding something that is for you and not for anybody else. And I think it's really important to find something that you love to do. And it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks about what that thing is. So whether it's dancing or baseball or horseback riding or swimming or weightlifting, whatever your thing is, find it and spend some time finding it, because it is something that can help you to develop into the person you want to be, and kind of help you to live your best life. So for me, that thing was swimming. It influenced me in ways that I probably don't even recognize, and I'm not sure who I would be if you took that piece of my life out. And so I think knowing what an important and influential part of my life that was, I hope that other people can find that thing, whatever it is for them, and move your body in a way that feels good to you and gives you some space to be who you are as a person.
Great. Any other parting thoughts you'd like to share?
No, I think it was fun being on this side of the mic, and now I know a little better about what it feels like to be on this side.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. I'm super excited that we got to flip the mic. You got to share your story, because I think it's a wonderful story, and we didn't touch half of it or a quarter of it probably, but I think it just gives people an opportunity to hear your story and what physical activity has done for you and means for you, and why you're such an important part of the Active Women's Health Initiative.
Thanks, Hannah.
Yes, well, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for listening to the Champions of Active Women podcast. This podcast is brought to you by the Active Women's Health Initiative and was produced by the Faculty Media Depot at the University of Kentucky. If you enjoyed this episode, you can listen and subscribe to all of our episodes wherever you find your podcasts. For up-to-date information about the Active Women's Health Initiative, you can find us on social media at UKAWHI. Thank you for supporting us as we work to promote health and physical activity among girls and women across the lifespan.